revolve my life around. Live on
Why not?
Facebook. I don't know. Maybe I should. Maybe that's where I went wrong.
That might be the way.
This is the way. Okay, and it looks like, let's see, we're live on Facebook. Yeah. What's up, people?
Oh,
We are now alive.
I am dead tired.
What you been doing?
Like kind of like 2-a-days on Tuesdays and Thursdays at the gymnasium, and it is just getting after me.
I need to get back to the gymnasium, as you put it.
Yeah,
I'm getting too fat.
it's so fun being fat though.
I, that's that's not false. It is very fun
Yeah,
being fat. I remember when I was in
God, I love
college
it.
and I weighed like I'm like 220 now. When I was in college, I weighed 250, and
You weigh 220?
yeah,
No,
I'm like
you're
6'1".
fucking huge.
Yeah,
Yeah, but still 220?
yeah.
That's
And I
big. That's still a big 6'1".
yeah, and it's I don't like if you looked at me, you probably wouldn't say, "Oh, that guy's kind of fat." I mean, I got a little bit of a dad bod going on, but like I kind of carry it pretty well.
Yeah.
But I was 250 in college, and that it was you would look at
Holy
me, you'd be
shit!
like, "That
I
guy's
want those
fat."
pictures so bad.
I'll see if I can find some. My face
Please
was really
find those
round.
pictures.
I could find you a really good picture. It's I don't know. I don't think I was 220, but I was probably like 235 maybe. And it was when
Yeah.
Amy and I first went to Universal Studios. And like I look fat. Um, but but yeah. So but like yeah, like identifying as a fat guy. I had another buddy of mine
Yeah.
then that was pretty fat too, and we both just we prided ourselves in being fat. Like we would go to
Fat is
Little
up.
Caesars, and we'd each
Hell
get
yeah.
a pizza and a cheesy bread and a 2 liter of soda, and like we would each get that, and we would each go through it. And yeah, Amy says that I was 240 when we met. So yeah, so it was about there. I think I peaked probably at like 255 maybe my last year of college.
Holy shit. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yep. I was way more physically active then than I am now too. I was like I played a lot of softball and I went golfing all the time
Oh
and I
man.
was very active. Now, I mean I probably go for a total of about 2.5 hours or 3 hours worth of walks every day. So I guess I'm pretty active, but
This is like, yeah, but this is way more fun for me because like I don't think that even at like 255, you probably don't look how I'm picturing you in my head, but I'm picturing you just like looking like really fat golfing and playing softball, like in between Little Caesars runs. That's pretty interesting. Let me tell you.
that was basically my last year or two of college. It was golfing, playing softball, and going to Little Caesars. Tell him what you and Alex did while eating all of that. I don't remember. I mean, we did a whole bunch of things. What thing are you thinking of in particular, Amy?
Yeah,
We
Amy.
one thing that maybe what she's thinking of is that we would watch Celebrity Apprentice, and so this was 2012, I think,
Damn.
about 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. 2011. Anyways, we would watch Celebrity Apprentice, and at the time, Alex was like, Donald Trump should run for president. Alex, my buddy, the other fat guy with me, who has since he's shorter than me. He's like 5'8" maybe, and he weighed as much as I did then. Now
Mm.
since then he's lost. I think he's probably like 180 or something now. He's lost a ton of weight. Anyways, um, no, we didn't watch the. I don't think we ever really watched The Bachelor. It was Celebrity Apprentice was the thing that we primarily watched. And so he was like Donald Trump should be president, and and I was like, oh yeah, that would be great, wouldn't that? You're fired. Ha ha ha. It's just kind of like
Yeah.
it was completely preposterous. It was like someone
It
suggesting
was.
right now like Snoop Dogg should be president or something. Where you'd be kind of like, yeah, that's
Yeah,
right, he should be.
except that's less preposterous still
Yeah.
because the door has been opened
Right. Yeah. That's
by
true.
by the
Now it's
Donald.
like, okay, yeah, reality TV star. So I guess Snoop Dogg. I guess it's just you're kind of making a sideways move. You're not like completely
Yeah.
reinventing the game. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that was funny. And then 3 or 4 years later, he was actually running. And Alex texted me, and he's like, "What have I done?"
That's funny. Can
Yeah.
I while we're waiting for people, and welcome to the show, everyone. But can I just read this because it makes my heart smile. This is Jeff Dice saying this.
Oh yes. You are always
Libertarians
welcome to read Jeff Dice on this show.
Libertarians have always been horrible about Trump. They've never got it. Trump won the presidency as a third party. The GOP was every bit against him as the Democratic Party. He won the presidency as a third party, and dopey libertarians can't seem to see any upside to that. And so I sort of edited it and abbreviated it. So it was kind of reading it weird, but was on Pete Quinones' podcast. And just to hear Jeff Dice say dopey libertarian, I want that to be my ringtone. He hits the D, he really winds up, he smashes the D in dopey. He says dopey libertarians. God, it made me smile. Love that man. I love that man.
Yes.
My favorite
Jeff
person
Dice,
that I've never met. Mm-hmm.
Tho Bishop. These are guys who get it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's guys who don't get it. But
there's several of those.
We one thing that I'm trying to do is be a little more
Positive.
we don't need
Positive.
to take every conversation as an opportunity to go guns blazing and starting a civil war kind of, even though it's tempting. So there's some specific things that are on our minds today, but we're probably not going to speak about them necessarily as explicitly as we probably want to, just in the interests of being respectful and I don't want this show to be. Uh-oh. You got the buzz back.
I do.
Yep. Oh, it went away.
Okay. I was because it was touching my toe. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, not your microphone. The cable on your microphone is touching your toe.
Sure.
Okay. Anyways, yeah, I don't want this show to be known as the show where we just show up and just hate on people specifically. I want it to be known as the show where we show up and just hate on people generally. Right. So try not to personalize it too much. So anyways, welcome back, folks. This is another episode of King Pilled. I am your host. I am the host. I am the God King of King Pilled. My name is Matt, and that is Steven. You can follow me at Real King Pilled. You can follow him at Messina Inc. on Twitter. Like and subscribe, share, etc. All that. Okay, go ahead. What are you going to say, Steven?
No, I'm the other.
The other God King.
The other God King. The other lesser God King of the show.
The lesser God King.
and for God's sakes, please don't follow me on Twitter. Whatever you do.
So today we titled this show "Liberty's Greatest Enemies," and
We'll give you some guesses.
I suppose if you've listened to any of our episodes in the past, so if you've never listened to this show before, let me put it this way: if you've never listened to the show before, you hear Liberty's Greatest Enemies, and I'm sure you're probably thinking of, Joe Biden or Donald Trump,
Barack Hussein Obama. How about that one?
George
Buster?
Bush. Yeah, these are probably the sorts of names that are coming to your mind. Or you might kind of think a little more universally, and you might just think of fascists or communists or monarchists, perhaps. I'm sure that's an easy thing to assume. So when you hear us speak of Liberty's Greatest Enemies, I'm sure that's probably one of the things that you think of if you've never listened to the show before. If you have listened to the show before, you know exactly who we're talking about. You know exactly who we consider to be Liberty's greatest enemies. And that is libertarians. Libertarians are the greatest enemies of liberty because they spend all their time casting great visions of what liberty might look like. And they spend, as we are here, they spend even more time going after other libertarians for not being libertarian enough. So there's a meta aspect to this show here. They're very focused on how not libertarian everyone else is, and how if only people would just subscribe to their vision of the world, they could actually achieve liberty. The problem is the problem isn't in that perspective. The problem is that their vision of the world is stupid. And they're just wrong. See, we here at King Pilled are the ones who actually have the proper view of what the world should look like, of what would maximize liberty. And if people would just drop all their other silly views and just subscribe to ours, we have all the answers. We know how it's supposed to be. We know the proper way to organize society. This has all been solved already. It's just a matter of people coming to grips with it. I just thought that'd be fun to kind of play into the hypocrisy a little bit.
Yeah.
But no. So
I sensed it.
Both of us right now, Stephen and I, just before we went live, we were just both kind of expressing our frustrations with the performative caricature of libertarianism that we're seeing portrayed across the internet. And it comes in, there's different varieties of it. Some of it is more elevated. Some of it is cast as perhaps more intellectual. Some of it is cast as more edgelord or provocative. But in either case, nobody is talking about the issues that actually matter. And when they do, they're talking about it in all the wrong ways, like Jeff Deist illustrated. The Trump phenomenon is just ripe with so much meaning. Trump, I wouldn't say Trump carved the path forward, but he at least hacked away a bunch of the brush and showed us the direction to travel. There's a phenomenon that libertarians just don't seem to come to grips with, which is that something that doesn't work can't be right. Being right and working are like synonymous. This concept of like if you listen to Jordan Peterson, he talks about truth and how truth is like a direction of an arrow. It's accurate. And sin in the Bible, sin is literally, the term sin literally means to miss the mark. So it's like an arrow that's flying and it drifts aside and it misses the mark, it misses the target. If something is not realistic, if something doesn't work, if something isn't working, by definition, it can't be right. So there's over the last couple of decades, I think that the rise of the internet has given people this perception, like suddenly now everybody's able to connect to each other and talk to each other. And so it's probably no coincidence that coincident with the rise of the internet is the spread of libertarianism. More like people are encountering more and more libertarians. Libertarian ideas are being talked about more and more.
They ain't gonna meet them anywhere else.
Good point. But I think that there's a false perception happening here, where there's this idea that this liberty movement is building and growing, and more people are signing on. And to be fair, there have been tens of thousands of new libertarians over the last decade. You know, and so if you start with tens of thousands and you get tens of thousands, you're like, hey, our movement doubled. Look at this progress. But when you're people can't conceive of the expanse of the population of the world. People cannot wrap their minds around the idea of 7 or 8 billion people. They can't wrap their minds around the idea of 350 million people in the United States. People basically can't even wrap their minds around more than about somewhere between 50 and 100,000 people, really. Even that, it's difficult. We automatically distill all of those people down into like their representative groups. So we're not, when we take into consideration when we're thinking about a group of people, we aren't thinking about all the individuals in the group. Once you get out beyond, several dozen people, really. This is the whole idea behind Dunbar's number, that large, like massive groups of people, we can't even fathom. We can't even comprehend what it means to have a large group of people like that with that many different diverse interests and personalities and everything. We just start stereotyping, and we just create groups of people, and we think of people in their groups. So the fact that people voting libertarian is in the neighborhood of a few million people, it's like, oh, a few million people, that's a big deal, that's so many people. But you got to think contextually here. 3 million in a nation of 350 million it's hardly even a blip. It's a thimble of water in the ocean. And there, if you trace the trajectory of the growth of the liberty movement over the last decade and trace that against the trajectory of the expanse of the totalitarian democratic state, if you compare those trajectories to each other, you should have a very clear perspective on what's going to happen first. We're not in this liberty movement, this political libertarian movement. We're not on the cusp of some great awakening. We're not just, it's not like, oh, just one more election cycle and we'll tip the scales. The current trajectory, if nothing else changed, just make the rest of society completely static, and then have the liberty movement continue on its current trajectory. We're talking about the Libertarian Party becoming a significant player, maybe like 2050, 2075. Like that's the trajectory that it's going on. And this is assuming like best case scenario. Like the rest of society just kind of stays static, and the Mises Caucus is able to marshal full control of the LP, and then the powerful moneyed interests, the intelligence agencies just fall away. They're like, oh wow, these guys, they're so principled. They just wrestled this party right away from us. There's nothing we could do about it. These FBI agents like shuffling back to their bosses, and like,
do you think that?
I don't know, man. These Mises guys, they're just operatives? Something else. What?
Do you think that there's government operatives in the Libertarian Party?
I think that there's government operatives in every political movement. Like, why wouldn't there be? Yeah. There is no greater incentive for the state than to be personally involved. Like, frankly, the vast majority of modern political movements were created by the state. They were started by the state. Either to create an opposition, to create the appearance of an opposition, to facilitate an agenda, or some sort of a study was being done that sparked an offshoot that led into like a political movement or something. Like, in some sense or another, the majority of political movements derive from the state. These aren't, they're astroturfed. They're not emergent things coming up from the ground. So this, it's like I go and I look at libertarians, broadly speaking, and you can categorize. There's a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm not a libertarian, but they have the they're a libertarian. They have the your idea is of you value limited government, and you deify the Constitution, and you're like, oh, well, the problem with America is that we got away from if we just get back to constitutional government, the Constitution wasn't set up to police the government. The people are supposed to police the government. So we just need to make sure people are getting the right education, and then people are being taught to hate America, and if they just would be taught to respect the founding fathers and what they like, if you're a libertarian, that's
Amen,
what a
brother.
libertarian is. And I listen to these people. I watch them talk.
Why?
And it's a perverse addiction. Some people have heroin. I have listening to libertarians online. So I feel like I'm watching. It's a tired analogy, but I feel like I'm watching people fiddling on the Titanic. Like they're just they they have no conception of the significance of this moment, of the magnitude of the task at hand, and how unprepared they are for it. You had a pretty good illustration of this. You were watching you saw a guy on posting something on Facebook just before we went live, and
Oh,
you had some thoughts on that.
I did. I did. I think. Well, I just think
Share them with
that
the class.
I think it's just very important for. Um, I think one of the things that I realized when I was, kind of playing around in the libertarian world, I knew it didn't quite describe me, uh, you know, perfectly. But I one thing that I noticed very quickly was that, like, everyone seems to have a post-libertarian moment, isn't that? That's worth exploring, isn't it? You know what I mean? Because I wonder, among that number that you're talking about, however many millions, um, I wonder what, like, the retention rate is on, like, people who, would still call themselves libertarians. I wonder, like, among that number, how many just say, you know what, fuck this, I don't know, I'm out. I'm uh, I'm a Republican. How about that? Or whatever, or you know, but because you did see, especially this election cycle, that a lot of the new recruits um, were seem to be displacing a lot of the people who had been around for a while, because they're basically just like social justice warriors who, um, you know, could have gone one way or the other maybe, and just don't have like deeper questions enough to determine whether they're just going to go that route, or they think they're being somehow vaguely counterculture while still having like all the social capital of being an SJW by being like, well, no, actually, I'm a libertarian. Um, I wonder what the retention numbers is on libertarians as such. But anyway, in exploring, as you would think, post-libertarian thought, um, you might wonder what holes are there in the ideology, um, and with that, you might kind of be one. You might be able to see where some traps are. You know, so as opposed to just presuming that you know everything and running full speed into a bear trap every day, um, like like a lot of my new libertarian timeline from the summer. Um, you might be able just to avoid that. I mean, you'd have to like listen to somebody else, or you'd have to be open to different ideas, and that seems to be quite a hurdle for a lot of them, being libertarians and all. But yeah, I was just kind of seeing broadly this whole this whole approach of, um, we after January 6th, of all times to do it. You know what? We're going full bore, straight ahead at this at this system that's definitely the same as the system as it was January 5th, and definitely the same as it was a year ago. Nothing different to be concerned about at all. We're going full bore, like right at it, and it's just an interesting choice. You know, back to the idea of government operatives. If there were government operatives in a movement, encouraging people to take this approach, it would seem like something that government operatives wanted, would advise you to do. Not saying that it is, but I'm just saying, if I were a government operative inside of a political movement, that might be the advice that I gave said political movement, so as to cut their legs out from under them. But anyhow, yeah, when I'm seeing people just kind of, just on a daily basis, do the thing where they point out, the left the left is hypocritical because of this, the right is hypocritical because of that. Um, Here's all my guns. The left is hypocritical because of this, the right's hypocritical because of this. Here's all my guns. Look at this epic burn that I had in showing, that the left was hypocritical on this and the right's hypocritical on this. By the way, here's all my guns. Um, you're just making it so easy for like a member of the public, or someone, because it's just like, man, I'm annoyed with libertarians. Like, I guarantee that I could and I wouldn't do it, but maybe I should try it. But like, it would be so easy just to get any one of these people. I don't even want to say what would be easy to make happen, but maybe get like a visit that was unpleasant, or just have their life be miserable, and like, so like I wouldn't do that, but I'm sure that there's members of there's like friends of friends, or people who are just, because you have to understand, libertarians, you're very annoying. You know what I mean? It's just like the tolerance level that like we have, like kind of built up for dealing with them. Like, we're annoyed with them, but like, you're really annoying to like other people. You know what I mean? You're a real cuckoo bird to other people. So it just makes it so easy. Just yeah. Hey, this guy's kind of railing against the government like every day. He's always talking about guns. Kind of weird for the climate that you're in. In this day and age, it's just like you're just handing them just like a real slow pitch, to bring it back to Matthew's softball days, that 250-pound Matthew could just crush out of the 60-foot diamond.
I was actually a lot better at the pitching part than the hitting part, but point taken. It's to run with your little conspiracy theory there. Let me kind of paint it in a light that might make it easier for people to attach themselves to, and to like has a more like emotional punch. So imagine that you are, this is 1600s, England or something, and there's or no, go even further back than that. Go back to the 800s, and there's like some crusade, or there's just some war going on, and you have an army that is entrenched and fortified inside a castle, surrounded by a moat. They've got some of the best projectile style weapons imaginable. So they're very good at preventing an attacking army from even getting close to their wall. And they have this army that's rallied against them, and that's trying to invade and break them down. Now, say that in order for this army to actually be able to overwhelm them through sheer force of will and sheer numbers, say that this army needs to be like 500,000 people. And so it's the army that's being led against this castle is mounting a coalition. It's bringing more and more people together. It's calling people from all across the countryside to come in and join forces to go wage war against this castle. And it's at the point where, maybe it needs 500,000 people, and it's at the point where it's got 50,000 people. Now, if you were the people inside this castle and you wanted to ensure a very quick and efficient victory, what better strategy could you think of than to send some people out, sneak some people out, and come work their way into this army when it's still very small, doesn't have the power to overwhelm their defenses, and persuade their warriors, their knights or whatever, that the best strategy here would be actually, if we want to take them out, we need to strike now. We need to strike early. We can't wait. We just have to just start mobbing them just go mobbing right at the wall. And the sheer force of our enthusiasm will rally people to our cause, and they'll just come streaming from the hillside down, and they'll come storm the walls with us. Like that would be something where you could really rally people emotionally around that idea. Like, yeah, we're gonna go charge, Leonidas and 300, and we're just gonna go mob the wall, and they won't be able to withstand our enthusiasm. That would be a pretty good way to just get that army to just wipe itself off and nip the entire thing in the bud, right? Like that's what politics is. Politics is war. It's literally institutionalized permanent warfare. So our favorite friend Dave Smith just tweeted an hour ago. I was looking at his timeline here. If you're a libertarian who doesn't put war at the very top of your priorities, then I prefer an anti-war leftist to you. I don't care how good you are on the minimum wage. If you don't oppose war, you are not opposed to the state. The guy who's talking about taking over a political party, otherwise known as an army, is talking about how anti-war he is. Now, there's a problem, kind of a problem here, where the type of war he's talking about is different than actual war, but that's one of the great tricks of the state. That's one of the great tricks of the cathedral, that they've redefined war. Now, war is just a sovereign nation state, getting involved in an international context against other sovereign nation states. Politics itself isn't war anymore. This isn't two different opposing armies rallying themselves against each other and trying to overpower one another. And then when they show up to the battlefield, just saying, you know what, hey, let's save ourselves all the trouble. Let's just count up our troops, and whoever brought more guys to the battlefield will just give them the victory. And that's what politics, that's what democratic politics is. It's permanent institutionalized warfare. And it operates by all the exact same rules as warfare. So if your position is, I'm anti-war, but also I'm going to take over a political party and go fight for power, you're incoherent. Your position is incoherent. You don't understand the actual situation that you're getting yourself into. And if you have no idea what you're getting yourself into, there's no way you're going to be successful. There's no way you're actually going to accomplish the end that you're seeking. It's just not possible. You don't even understand what you're doing. So of course you're not going to get the result that you want. But this is the depth of analysis that is popular among libertarianism. They have no explanation for the state. They just have state evil. State equals evil. That's the end of the conversation. And fundamentally, it's they don't arrive at that by some principled means. You know, they read a whole bunch of books and they give themselves a post hoc rational justification for why they got to that point. But fundamentally, to arrive at the libertarian perspective, you just have to be, it starts with rebellion against authority. It starts with you being like, fuck this guy for having power over me. I don't like it. Let me find a justification for why it's right for me to feel that way. That's how it starts. That's how the libertarian mind begins. Because this is the way humans make decisions. Humans make decisions emotionally, and then they seek a rational justification retroactively. This is just how the human mind works. But the libertarian archetype sees himself as the most rational person in the room. And part of the reason why is because there's this, you have two different broad categories of people that are going at each other. So it's very easy to start to think, okay, well, like you could side yourself with one or the other, but that doesn't really make you all that special. So then people have the urge, well, I don't want to identify with either one of them. So I'm going to go searching for an alternative path. It's not, I don't think either one of them is right. It's, I don't want to identify with them. I don't feel comfortable with either side. And then you search for a justification. Well, why is that? Well, I think this is wrong or that is wrong. Okay, well, if I think that's wrong, there must be something that's right. So let me go searching for the thing that's right. Ultimately, it's just contrarianism. It's just feeling like an outcast, like feeling like you don't belong with these other people, and which is primarily driven by a desire to be independent, to not submit to any type of authority, and then just wanting to be different. And so, like, it makes you feel special because, like, oh, I don't side with those guys or those guys. I'm actually one of the special ones. I'm one of the special ones who doesn't. What?
Have a tendency to want to feel special and feel different.
Yes, everyone has a tendency to want to feel special and different, but the ones who have seeded themselves over to it the most are the libertarians. And there, I mean, there's scholarship on this that libertarians, people who identify as libertarians, overwhelmingly score like way higher in contrarianism. And like that's the root. Libertarians want to fancy themselves, oh, they're so principled. But you didn't start with your principles. You reasoned back to your principles from the initial instinct, which was anti-authoritarian or not anti-authoritarian, but just anti-authority and contrarianism. Like those are the things that's how it starts. And see, the thing with most people is they don't have this extra process of the reasoning back and coming up with all these justifications. That part isn't as fleshed out. They're more just going with their instincts. This is how the vast majority of people are. They're just going with their instincts. They're just siding with they're not siding with Democrats because they have some principled elaboration about human rights and all of this. They're siding with Democrats because culturally Democrats are cool. Republicans are backwards goofballs and Democrats are cool. So they're siding with them culturally. People who side with Republicans do it because it's counterculture. Because Democrats are stuffy and boring and weird, and they invite a whole bunch of really awkward, weird people to come hang out with them, and they don't want to be a part of that. And I'd rather be Republican. Like this is the level of analysis for the vast majority of people. Or they have like a single issue where they happen to know a little something about that, that they, maybe they're a phlebotomist or something, and they're involved in medicine, and so they've got a strong opinion about abortion, and But this is the level that people are operating on. These are the rules of the game. This is how the game works. People factionalize according to their gut and their feelings and their emotions and what seems cool or what seems attractive to them. So if you aren't hitting people in their gut, if you aren't offering them something to identify with that is more powerful and seductive emotionally than either being fashionable like the Democrats or being rebellious and counterculture like the Republicans, you have nothing. You don't have a movement. You have a social club that is weird, that people don't really like. Like you don't actually, you're not building a movement.
It's pretty funny.
To have a movement, you have to be going somewhere. It's called a movement. You don't have a movement. You hardly have a party. And you might ask yourself why this is. Why, if the state is so bad, is so egregious, if its injustices are so awful, if it's oppressing people so much, why are they not beating down your door, clamoring for your message? Why are you having to contort yourself into pretzels to come up with some way to explain yourself to them, to get your highfalutin, well-reasoned arguments in front of them and get them to just accept them? Like, you got your hum again. Why do libertarians not ask these questions? Why does the level of reasoning go as far as I figured everything out, so anybody who doesn't see the world the way I do is stupid, evil, or both? That's the sum total of libertarian rationalism, of libertarian analysis of modern political culture.
Because the goal is to exalt the individual, but specific, yeah.
But not a personal individual. It's like this idealized conception of an individual. It's like the utopian picture of what the supreme exalted individual would be. They're starting with this conception of people as that every single person is a potential, every single person inhabits the capacity to be the potential idealized individual. And it's just a matter of removing the boot of oppression from their necks, and then they will be it's like their ideal individual will shine forth and will usher in an era of peace and harmony. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Um, I think there's that, and I think there's also that like that's in many ways like what's enough for them. If they feel that they're fighting against something, um, but that they're doing it righteously, and that their efforts are demonstrated, that will give evidence that they are intellectually and morally superior to anyone else in
Right.
the
Yeah.
world of politics or around them. I think that's the currency, and I don't think winning is really a priority, or like if like most libertarians can be involved so that people can like can see them, and they can have their principles and lose, as long as they're on record as having their principles, and that they can share it with the world. I think that they're content with that.
Hmm. That's a
So
good
at some point,
observation.
it doesn't. You know, you're complaining about you're complaining about bombing brown babies and being in the Middle East and being very sanctimonious and politicizing news stories. And libertarians politicize um, news stories and any articles and whatever as much or more as anybody. But it's about themselves, always. So it very quickly becomes not about any particular issue. It really, just looking at it, it just appears quite obviously that it's only about how they come off,
Hmm.
either to other people in the social club that nobody likes,
Hmm.
primarily.
Right. Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's the um. What did I say before? I said that most people would rather be the king of the sandbox than middle management on the whole playground or something like that. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
libertarians are
Mm-hmm.
trying to be, the king of the sandbox. They're ultimately they're really, which is like every single
This is dope
person.
right here. Let me just. This is pretty good. They simultaneously think that individuals are too evil to be allowed to inhabit the state, but are also good enough to live by the nap, enough to make anarchy feasible. Popular liberty.
Yep,
Pretty good.
Popular Liberty's got some good thoughts. I was just reading the comments here, and the comments are really good. I'm gonna catch up on some of this here, read it in a sec. I just wanted to say that um, the this idea of the libertarians want to be the king of the sandbox rather than middle management in the whole playground. That's every single person. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
libertarians think they're better than that. Libertarians think that they're better, smarter, more well educated, more evolved than these rubes who fall for this Democrat Republican thing. But
Mm-hmm.
you just have a different social circle. You're just trying to be the king of your social circle. You're trying to gain value in your social circle. That's what every other person is doing. Every other person's doing that exact same thing in their own social circle. It's that their social circle values different things than yours. So you're trying to gain status in your libertarian social circle, be a libertarian celebrity, have your libertarian friends tell you how moral you are. And even if you didn't have libertarian friends there to tell you that, you would create a fictionalized version of them and imagine them looking at you and praising you for being this oasis in the middle of a wilderness of unprincipled, immoral people. You'll invent that person and imagine that person hypothetically viewing you, like the person who's just, you might post your thing on Facebook and it'll get like one like, some virtue signal about opposing the state or something. And what you're imagining is you're imagining a bunch of hypothetical libertarians or people who value your social circle scrolling past and being like, ah, yeah, he's
Yeah,
one of
man.
them. Yep, that's he's got it. He's one of those. It's just in group signaling. This is all that all of these things are, and it's you made a great observation that libertarians would rather be right than effective. They would rather be right and lose and have no impact than be effective and win in a small area, but have to compromise a principle or something. And the greatest thing about this too is that a lot of the people who are that way are consider themselves Rothbardians. The guy who
Yes.
the guy who
Yeah.
willingly allied himself with KKK members and with communists. He allied himself with anybody who would get the job done. Anybody, like toward the end, he was talking about the necessity of participating. Let me mute you here for the train. Toward the end, he was talking about the necessity of climbing aboard the platform of right-wing populism. That right-wing populism is the way forward. That to undermine and destroy the bureaucratic state, there needed to be this message of right-wing populism that got totally into identity politics and all this other stuff. All this stuff that people think they're too good for. If you think you're too good for these things, you don't belong in politics, because this is what politics is. You're trying to make politics into something that it's not, and you think that you are playing the game and the game is playing you. That's the truth. That's where the liberty movement is at today. There's a couple of good. Let me get you unmuted here.
That's the thing is like, I'm not. I think you can make room for both. But if you're one of these, if because when I'm talking about, they'd rather keep their principles. I don't know. I have that impulse too. But the idea is just, if you're gonna be that person, what are you doing anywhere near politics?
Right.
It's just gonna. If you don't understand politics, and not even like you don't understand it enough to win, but you just don't understand the arena that you're in. You're just gonna get chewed up and used for evil. You're anything that you stand for from a principle basis, like you're going to do harm to anything that those principles stand for. If you enter that. So if you're all about your principles, I mean, you have to find a different arena, but just certainly stay out of politics.
That's a paradox of politics, that trying to stand upon your principles, if you're a libertarian, trying to stand upon your principles is effectively the same as destroying your principles within the context of politics. So if you want to spread your principles, if you want to make your principles more popular, or make your principles have more influence, then you have to do something other than operate according to them. That's the great dilemma. That's the bind of modern libertarian political movements, is that in order to, it's like we have to violate the Constitution to save the Constitution. We have to violate our principles to spread our principles. So then that makes you think, okay, well, is there something wrong with our principles? Because if our principles lead us to activity in this particular region, where when we participate in that region according to our principles get destroyed, then it's like, okay, well, what's wrong with your principles then? It seems like maybe you have grounded yourself in axioms that either aren't actually they aren't actually axiomatic, or you just have interpreted them the wrong way. You're interpreting and applying them the wrong way. Something isn't right if acting according to your principles puts you in a worse spot than not acting according to your principles. You were going to say
Isn't
something.
it funny that no, I was thinking, you talk about Rothbard and how right-wing populism was a necessary message to advance the cause of liberty or whatever. And when opening with that quote from Mr. Deist in the lessons that were missed from the Trump moment by quote unquote And again, I'll never get tired of saying this. Dopey libertarians.
Dopey libertarians.
It was so good to hear him say it. You really just got to listen just to that part of the podcast.
I feel like we
Just
need
the
to make
way-
some
way
merch
he
that
says
says
it.
something about dopey libertarians. Yeah, figure out a
we'll
way
give
to
We'll
incorporate
give a
that
cut
into
to
a
the
t-shirt.
Mises Institute because, yeah,
Yeah.
intellectual property. They're big fans of intellectual property over there.
Let me read through some of these comments here because some of these have been really good.
They're very good.
First of all, I'd like to
Welcome to King Pilled.
thank you for King Pilled, or welcome to King Pilled. Thank you to Amy for pointing out that that Matt is a much better pitcher than catcher.
I saw that.
My
was.
I'm proud of my
Hey,
wife.
should know, fellas.
Oh yeah. I guarantee you, she just went, oh.
Oh yeah, I wanted to type in there and something. Yeah, and Eastwood is a real home run.
It's funny. Just before we went live here, I had some stuff I needed to listen to, and I always think better if I'm either walking or driving, and so
Yep.
I just like if I'm on the
Such a man.
phone and talking and thinking, I always pace. I can't just sit still and talk. So I just took him out. I'd gone for a walk for like an hour and a half with him this morning in his stroller. And so then I took him out. I'd stuck him in his car seat. Amy fed him, got him asleep, put him in the car seat, and then went and drove around for like an hour. As I was listening to Dominion by Tom Holland, which if you guys are going to keep following and listening to this show, especially for future episodes, you have to read Dominion by Tom Holland. You have to read it. It's
That
so
might have been the book I
crucial.
was looking for.
Yeah, Dominion by Tom
It
Holland.
might have been.
It's like the history of Christianity, and he approached it from a at least nominally from a non-Christian perspective. Like he's not advocating for Christianity and he's not advocating against it. He's just kind of like trying to describe it as a historical phenomenon. And his takeaway from it was realizing that his entire perspective, his entire frame on the world was Christian. As he went back and started studying the Greeks and Romans and Persians and then the development of the Christian church and its elaboration all the way through the Crusades and through the Reformation, the Enlightenment, and all this, he realized that what we think of as Westernization, our Western minds, are fundamentally Christian. That there's things we perceive about the world that we would not see, or we would not think of them that way if it wasn't for Christianity. And they're fundamental baseline things about the world, like the idea of linear time with a beginning and an end. That's Christian. The idea of the secular versus the religious. That's Christian. The idea of separation of church and state. That's Christian. The idea that you have a religion and then you have the rest of your life, and the idea that you have politics and then you have religion, and then you, like the idea of these separations like that. That's Christian. These are all characteristics or facets of Christianity. These are things that you only think in these terms if you are descended from Christians. So effectively, our entire culture is inextricable from Christianity. And once you understand that, once you realize that, once you see how these different pieces all came together, it gives you a lot of clarity on, at least for me, like once I start understanding the minds of people around me and what their value system is, where their value hierarchy came from and how it was developed, then I feel better equipped to both predict how they're going to act and manipulate how they're going to act, have some sort of an influence on trying to get them to act this way versus that way. So that book, as we go forward and talk about some of this stuff in the future, like that book is going to be essential. One thing that I wanted to talk about it today, but I just didn't. I still have thoughts on it that I need to get put in order, and I need to get some citations and stuff before I really hit on this subject. But a subject we're going to touch on in a future episode is related to a Facebook post I made this week that really got some people riled up. And I said that anarchism is self-worship, and which is rejection of God. And that,
Matthew, if I can jump in and defend Matthew, he is never one to attempt to rile people up. He just speaks from the heart.
Yeah, it's it's just my soul. My soul is just I'm just giving voice to my soul and putting it out there. I have no desire.
My
to
man,
get
he
people
wakes up and he
stirred
says, "I just want to bare my soul on Facebook. Whatever comes out, comes out."
So like Mama June.
I don't know. I've been falling into that like every day for about like a week and a half now. I just start doing that. I don't know what it is.
That's the North Carolina in you.
Yeah, I've lived here longer than I have lived any other place, so I don't know.
Huh.
I'm a North Carolinian, I guess.
Okay, so back to these comments here. So really good point here made by Miguel Arevalo. He said politics is anarchy. Anarchy is power politics, and that's a very very good point. And then this is a I want to paint this on my wall. He said, Matt, you're talking about people who study economics who are then trying to apply their methods to politics. Yes, that's libertarians. Libertarians have studied economics and they think they've solved politics. And so they're engaging in politics. They're trying to practice politics as if it's economics. And what's fascinating is that so they look down their nose on statists and like, you guys don't understand economics. In the same sense that statists don't get economics, libertarians don't get politics. Statists get politics. So statists are taking politics into the field of economics. Libertarians are taking economics into the field of politics. So libertarians have this deeply, every libertarian prides himself in being so much smarter and more educated than all of the rubes that endorse and support the state. But they actually understand how the state works. They understand it at a fundamental level. Like they can't even explain how they understand it. They just do because it's like their culture. And your perspective, you as a libertarian, your perspective on their relationship to economics, you are just as incompetent with respect to politics as they are to economics. That dichotomy just clarified it in my head right after I read that comment from him. And I think that I posted a meme, one of the mind expanding memes a few months back, and I can't remember exactly what order I put them in, but I think I said I said politics is like the least woke is politics, and then the next one was economics, and then the next one was religion, and then the last one was politics. So I'm sort of mixing up the mind expanding meme with the IQ bell curve meme. But that's kind of what this is here, that libertarians have, they see themselves as having transcended politics. They're like, oh, it's actually economics. Every political decision is an economic decision. So we're going to bring economics to this conversation here. But what they're doing is they're not engaged with the politics people who are the lowest level of the mind expanding meme. They're engaged with the politics people who are the highest level, the people who actually where their politics is their religion. But anyways, this is a subject that I want to get into more in the future, describing why I believe that anarchism is fundamentally a rejection of God, why it is self-worship, and why that the implications for that on both politics and religion. It's a very interesting subject for me. But now I'm a lot more comfortable speaking on the politics side of things, but I want to back myself up with more citations on the religious side of things before I start getting into some of these deeper theological conversations. So, okay, so scrolling back down through these comments here, Popular Liberty says, we don't have a state in spite of people being mostly good. We have a state because people are mostly evil and want a state to facilitate them being evil. And he equates evil with left, which is also, that's another episode I want to do, but that's going to be related, where that right equals good and left equals evil. That's See,
what we like to do here is come up with our conclusions and then do post hoc bullshit research
exactly
to fortify those.
Mm-hmm.
But at least we're going to be honest about it. God damn it.
See, part of the problem for me is that I come to a conclusion after reading like 10 books and going through and consuming every piece of content that Jordan Peterson and Vin Armani and whoever else, it's my flavor of the week. I've sit here and I've just accumulated a whole bunch of content, and my mind has sorted it all out, and I get to the end of it, I'm like, okay, conclusion. Okay, now I understand
Yeah,
that this makes
but
sense to me. But now I'm
it's
like,
like an
okay, how did I
intrinsic.
get there? I
Yeah,
have to
it's
go
like
back and trace
yeah.
it back.
It happens, during sleep time.
Yeah,
But like as opposed to like actually making like an outline and just map out the thought process,
right.
that yeah, you have to go back after post facto.
Right. And people
Yeah.
don't want really long, complex, detailed justifications for something because it's difficult to go through and trace all of that yourself. You're like, okay, well, there's so many different areas here where someone could have taken a detour into bullshit. So I have to go back through and evaluate every last little step for myself. People don't want to do that. People want a snappy conclusion that is just there and they can understand it implicitly. So it appeals to their biases. And so what we have to do here is we have to try to come up with a way to take something that's long and complex and boil it down into a simple, easy to articulate reality, and that takes time. Okay, so yeah, most people their instincts say follow the herd. We have a state because people are mostly evil. Obviously, there's a deep theological discussion to be had here on that. I would say that there's semantics between is the person evil or is the product of the person is evil a product of the person's actions? Is it intrinsic to the person or is it a product of the sum total of their actions? That's a I see both sides of that conversation. And I think that's probably another interesting subject to discuss. But I think that whether it's one or the other, it definitely is that evil is a product of the sum total of their actions. So even many people who are very well-meaning, who I may not even be comfortable categorizing them as evil. I think that they may be, as far as they know, to the extent of their knowledge, they may be attempting to do what's right.
The end product, though.
But the end product of it, yeah, the end result, they've missed the mark. So
they've sinned.
And that's the concept. Yeah, they've sinned. So that's what we end up having is we have the consequence of all of these people's actions, and it doesn't matter the way you organize a society, you're always going to get the sum total of people's actions equaling evil. You're always going to get some sort of an evil arrangement. So it's now you're dealing with, once you've accepted that, now you're like, okay, well, how do we engineer a system whereby we constrain or protect ourselves, we constrain that evil or protect ourselves from it or minimize its influence? And again, that's not a moral problem. That's after the moral problem. You have the moral problem of deciding, okay, good versus evil. After that, you're like, okay, well, then it's the engineering conversation. And people, especially the libertarians, they mix those two up. They think that the state is a moral question, that we're trying to solve a moral question. We're trying to make a moral case to people. And you aren't. People don't give a shit about your morals. People want to know what problems you're going to solve for them. So you have your morals, you solve that problem for yourself. Once you have, now you're dealing with an engineering problem, which is the state exists, it grows, people are attracted to it, people are drawn to it, people want to use it, and there's a natural cycle or a natural trajectory here. So let's understand that trajectory, understand where it's going, and figure out how we can build an off-ramp. Figure out how we can create an opportunity for people to abandon this sinking ship and choose a better alternative. And once you get into that conversation's a lot easier to have, because then it's just like, okay, well, what are people attracted to? What are people drawn to? How do you get someone to do what you want them to do? Now you're into sales and marketing. And so this is where all these different subjects, they all come together, and you have to break this problem down accurately. But libertarians haven't even ventured into that territory. All they've done is decided the state is evil, so we're going to use whatever means seem most obvious to us to go attack the state. And because the state is evil, fighting it by any means necessary is by definition good. So we are now making ourselves holy through our attempt to war against the state. And really all you're going to do is just make yourself a martyr. And, every war needs martyrs, but if you're going to martyr yourself, better to martyr yourself at the end of the fight than at the beginning. And I would say we're at the beginning. Okay, so whoops, everything just jumped ahead. Man, you guys are talkative today.
Thank
Um,
God for that.
yeah. Um, Miguel again, he says there is no libertarian analysis of politics. It's like Marxism or democratic peace theory that the world will be fine if only we have the same economic political system. Yep. 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 They simultaneously think the individuals are too evil to be allowed to inhabit a state, but are also good enough to live by the nap enough to make anarchy feasible. Yeah, that was Popular Liberty has some really really good insights on this. We're going to bring him on here at some point and have a conversation with him because he brings a really good perspective to this. Jared says Dave's tweet was attempting to build a bridge with a red-pilled leftist Caitlin Johnstone. While the tweet may not single-handedly win the entire power struggle, he's engaging with another circle. But that's the thing. He's not engaging with another circle in a context that's going to be productive because he's not speaking to their soul. He's he's framing libertarianism to leftists in a way that would be appealing to libertarians. He's just preaching to the choir. He's trying to reach out, but just reaching out isn't good, you know, by itself, just by its own nature. In fact, it can be bad. It can be bad if you have bad marketing, if your product has bad marketing, but it's a good product, you can kill the product with the bad marketing because people will associate your product with the bad marketing. And then you've put yourself in the position of either having to rehabilitate your product or just repackage it altogether. And libertarians have very, very bad marketing. And I think this comes from probably, again, from the product of being contrarian. People being, by their nature, they're very, they don't want to see themselves as categorized with anybody else. They don't identify with anybody else. But the flip side of that is they don't understand how anybody else thinks. They don't understand how people operate. They don't understand how groups of people form, how societies arrange themselves, because they don't think in terms of psychology like this. This is why you have the libertarian autistic meme, because they're very autistic in the way that they approach these subjects. They approach human relationships very scientifically. And it comes off like you're just never going to build a successful social movement with people who are really autistic in the way they interact with people. Popular Liberty. Monarchy also assumes most are too evil or incompetent to be allowed to inhabit a state, but solves it by giving all the power to a qualified middle manager. The left doesn't want a bridge where their enemy to be squashed. Jared says, you may be right about monarchy, but a good monarchy will still have sages or thinkers discussing ethics, ideas, etc. That's true. That's actually very true. That's an important observation because there's this idea that a monarch would just be would rule as a god, sort of. And that's how it happened in the past. You know, I was having a conversation recently about 1 Samuel 8, and where the Israelites reject the system of government that God had set up, the system of priests and judges, and they demanded a king. They wanted Saul. And so people are saying, oh, well, this is the fact that was a bad thing is the Bible saying that monarchy is bad. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think that's reading Western sentiment back into the story. But a monarch is basically every person, with the exception of psychopaths, has a desire to be liked, to be accepted as a good person. People have this kind of innate desire. So a monarch who is installed in a proper monarchy has an incentive to take care of his people because the condition of his kingdom reflects personally on him. So if he doesn't know how to solve those problems, he's going to try to surround himself with people who can solve those problems for him. So he's going to surround himself. So monarchs and every government ultimately winds up outsourcing their decision making to theological organizations, whether that's in like academia, like we have now, and scientists and experts, or whether it's a chief of an Indian tribe with his shaman, or like you're always going to have this relationship between the governing head and some sort of a spiritual, moral advisor.
And what Matthew and I here are clearly saying is that in 2024, we want God Emperor King Trump with Sage Shaman Rand Paul. It's very easy what we're advocating. If you hear anything different.
Right. Yeah. Go with that. So I think that's a good point. But then the people who are going to be the people who are going to be the successful sages or thinkers are going to be the ones whose ideas comport to the real world most effectively. The ones that say, do this and this will happen. And the king does this and this happens. Like that's you want to have that dynamic, because those are the advisors and thinkers that are gonna be adaptive, that are gonna stick around. So you need to have a really intimate understanding of the nature of the world and the nature of reality and the functioning of human societies, and you need to like be a real student of humanity and a student of reality. And like Miguel pointed out up here, right now, the people who value liberty, the people who are the most vocal in claiming they want to bring about liberty or whatever, they're not students of humanity or they're students of economics. That's it. They're students of economics who make themselves feel good by being anti-war. And that's that. There's no substance to the movement. So he says, for Popular Liberty says, formalism is an excellent merger of anarchism and monarchism because people suck at voting, but they're pretty decent when it comes to shopping. That's a good way. I like that framing. People suck at voting, but they're pretty decent when it comes to shopping.
And the good thing is that you're talking about the ideas that work in the real world. Everything's much more naked, in terms of where the power is and where the ideas are coming from, or who at least is responsible for them. Because of anything that's wrong in the world, I mean, what's the fraction of people that are blaming Harvard and the New York Times for what's wrong in the world? It's not big enough, certainly, but it's not as easy to point to as just like, oh yeah, King that guy.
Right. You don't have to have an elaborate conversation about it. You have to say everything sucks and he's the guy who's responsible for it. And so now all of a sudden the king has all this popular sentiment being riled up against him. So, I mean, in the past, what happened was the king, like, to try to keep himself stable, a king would go and just like slaughter anybody who dared challenge him. And to some extent, I can understand some justification for that. If you are someone who just kind of has a hobby horse issue and you're going to completely upset the apple cart and just like, just take a hatchet to the foundation of society, like peace depends upon stability and order. You can't have peace if there isn't stability and order. You can't have peace without an absolutely enforced law. That requires stability and order, and it requires clear hierarchies where there is no conflict and there's absolute respect for authority in a given structure. Those are things that you have to have in order to have peace, stability, etc. So if some guy is like, "Hey, well, I've got this particular issue that's burning a hole in me," and instead of going through the normal courses to try to solve this problem, I'm just going to go out on the street and start preaching and like raising Cain and trying to get people to just burn the society down. I think that it's very justifiable for a sovereign power to see that as criminal behavior. This person here is seeking to rip the fabric of society for his own personal reasons. This guy doesn't have. If you're out in the streets preaching and like raising hell and trying to get people rallied up and starting riots and stuff, I don't care what your moral cause is. No moral cause is sufficient justification for destroying the fabric of society. Solve your problem in the least destructive means possible. So within that context, like Yarvin has pointed out in some of his writings before, that an absolute state has no need for controlling what its citizens think, because it's like, well, you don't have a vote, you don't have a choice in the matter, so you can think whatever you want. I'm still the one in power. That's true to the extent that the sovereign power is protected and safe and secure in his power. If his power is being threatened, then he has an incentive. So what this means is, if you don't want a sovereign power to start smashing people with a hammer, then don't threaten the sovereign power. Don't get directly in its face and challenge it. Which is partly why I think why Paul said in Romans 13, this is going to be a later conversation too, but just touching on it, Paul said in Romans 13 to submit yourself to the authorities. And that's part of the reason why. Because if you are like, whatever hobby horse you have, whatever thing that you're bent out of shape about, yeah, that's probably a legitimate cause. There's a legitimate injustice here, and we need to solve this problem. So the way you solve this problem is the way you solve any other problem. You come up with a solution that solves everyone's problems, where everybody can buy in, where everyone's like, yeah, I have an incentive to get involved in this and solve this problem because I'll personally benefit from you. If you're the one bringing the problem, the onus is on you to come up with that solution that solves it for everyone. And what he's saying is, don't just like raise hell and just like rebel for the hell of it just because you have a problem with the leadership structure. Number one, he says, don't do it because, like, basically for self-preservation. Don't get yourself thrown in prison over tax evasion when you could just pay the taxes and make more money. At the same time, he also said God has appointed these rulers. God has put them where they are, which I think is just another way of saying, like, fate has put them there. Yeah. They're there because they're there. The king is the king because the king is the king. And if you don't like that, there can be a process for trying to change it. But if that process involves completely upending the chessboard and destroying lives in the process, then you've just created an even bigger problem. So in that context, then I think that human beings are in an absolute sort of a regime like that, by and large, the sovereign power would have no need to crush dissent, as long as that dissent wasn't aimed at upsetting the apple cart. But I think that the dynamic of the past monarchies in the Middle Ages or whatever, those information traveled differently back then than it does now. Now, back then it would be pretty easy to control the spread of information in a given area. Now it's impossible. Now it's just like it's just an inevitability that through the internet it's going to get out. So that changes the calculus. Like now the regime either has to be built upon the understanding that anybody can find out stuff at any point, and if you want to retain power, you're best suited behaving in a way that's going to keep people from being inclined to overthrow you. So in other words, it's best to be benevolent and to get yourself the like Julius Caesar had the people loved him. The common people loved him. It was the Senate it was the aristocrats who hated him. The common people adored him because he did so much for them. He appealed to them. It was the nature of populism. But this is the way that an effective monarch would rule: is he would position himself where he's known as benevolent and open-minded and willing to care for people and go out of his way to provide for them. There's a natural incentive baked in to a system like that, as long as it's built with that understanding. And the thing that the people in the Middle Ages didn't have that we have now is the understanding of what didn't work in the Middle Ages. So past monarchs that devolved into democracy and chaos and anarchy, we now have that understanding. They didn't necessarily know that their behavior then was going to create the situation that we have now. Now, a hypothetical future monarch would have that understanding that we just came out of this chaos, this anarchic democratic chaos, and we've reestablished peaceful, lawful order, and we want to retain that. So we don't want to repeat the steps that led us to the chaos that we just escaped from. So I think when people look at these, they take, like 14th century England and they just transplant it directly to 21st century America, and they try to imagine it all operating exactly the same, and it's not going to. But you're thinking about it the wrong way, because obviously we're not just going to like snap our fingers and have 14th century English monarchies sprout up fully formed. So when people say, well, you can't have monarchy because it would do blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, let's solve that problem then. Is there a way to solve that problem? And it just so happens that monarchy is the system that's the easiest to adapt to all these different problems because it has the least expansive bureaucratic state that has to be adapted to everything. Go ahead.
It would be really fun to troll people, though. Like if you and I if we just didn't have this conversation out there, if we somehow delete this section of the conversation, we just show up with like scepters, we just start talking in British accents and
like learn old English.
Oh yeah, and just.
Oh, that's funny. That'd be great.
It'd be pretty good.
Do every single episode like that, and we would have 11 people who watch every episode.
Well, I don't know. We might be like the heroes to some young boys out there who are just like super unironically like into that.
Yeah. Like the children of Jordan Peterson.
Well, I can't make that joke I wanted to make. Fuck.
Did you hear my joke?
Yeah.
You're just avoiding it. Yeah. We'll get into that at some point.
Sure.
Okay, back to the comments. Oh yeah, 15 people watching, but only 5 likes on the video. Come on, people, like the video. Now there's 11.
I see 19 people, my man. I don't know what you're talking about.
I was reading the comment that Amy left, but yeah, now 19 people watching, 11 likes. Come on, people, get your act together.
We're crushing it. We're almost at 300. We're very close to being a third of a way to 1,000 subscribers.
We're almost to 1,000 subscribers.
Yes.
And I don't feel like we're any closer to getting banned. I think we need to step it up a little bit.
We really do.
We could start talking about some of the things that I tweeted recently about white people. Yeah, we'll do that next episode.
Right. Yeah, maybe.
Popular Liberty, they want to go to war with principles that are the equivalent of a butter knife. Harmlessness is not virtuous. Harmlessness is not virtuous. That's an idea. The idea that harmlessness is virtuous, that's an idea that would not exist without Christianity. And that's obviously the idea of power in victimhood or strength and weakness. That's another Christian idea, which happens to be the idea that animates the Church of Woke. Which, I mean, we've gone into that in the past, but that's an interesting observation that they're very much a Christian. This wokeism move is a Christian denomination. It's like a Christian cultish sect that is hell bent on purging the church of iniquity. They're trying to eliminate the original sin of bigotry, and invoke a utopia of love for all, love and tolerance for all, which is just absolutely steeped in Christian ethos. Jared, have you guys seen Adam Curtis's documentary Can't Get You Out of My Head? No, I have not. Should I see it? Let me know why I should see it. My co-host gave me the book The Education of a Christian Prince by Erasmus, which is basically a line-by-line refutation of Machiavelli's The Prince. They have the laws of physics and think it quals. Okay. The Education of a Christian Prince by Erasmus. I'd be very interested in reading that. A refutation of The Prince. Okay. They don't understand that the spontaneous order is balance of power. This Miguel guy, he's got some good thoughts. We viscerally don't want to understand politics. Economics is beautiful and politics is revolting, but hey, we have to grow up someday. Politics is only revolting if you have the wrong perspective on it. It's fascinating if you don't. Or it's fascinating if you have the right perspective on it. Because it's actually indistinguishable from religion. The distinction that we've made between politics and religion is a false distinction. Somehow the Western mind holds these two as separate categories, but they aren't. They're very much the same category, and they always blend themselves back together. When you start interpreting politics through the lens of religion, then it's very, very easy to understand, and it's just the nature of man. It's the exact same story of mankind that's happened like forever. So if you think politics is revolting, really what you're saying is mankind is revolting, which is kind of that actually makes sense that a libertarian would feel that way, because this idea that economics is beautiful, but politics is revolting. It's like hypothetical abstractions of humanity are beautiful, but the actual real functional humanity is revolting. That's interesting. That's revealing. Formalism is an engineering exercise. Yes, correct. And okay, so Miguel says Erasmus' common good can lead one down a wrong path. It is Wilsonian logic of moralizing politics. Machiavelli argues you have to keep yourself in check. This is good conversation we've got going on here. We have very, very good comments we have very good commenters who follow our show. Okay, I'm not going to read every single one of these just because obviously I just can't do that. So, but
this is something that could just continue on to the supporting listeners group.
Right. Yeah. If you guys want us to just read your comments, and you just have to join the supporting listeners group. I don't know why you guys haven't yet. If you haven't joined it, I don't know what's wrong with you.
Why haven't you?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we really get into it.
Vin Armani on Adam Patrick, You're Talking Over Me show described what happened to the Free State Project during COVID was pretty damn shame, especially when it has been around for a while now. Yeah, that was a good point that Vin made. He talked about how the Free State Project has been going for like 20 or 25 years, and they haven't completely taken over the New Hampshire government structures, but they're like infested in everywhere. And there's no distinction between how New Hampshire responded to the crisis and the crisis and how every other state responded. The Free State Project is just a categorical failure. It's just a comprehensive categorical failure. And yet there's still this libertarian notion that all we have to do to achieve the libertarian society is elect libertarian politicians. That's fundamentally the libertarian political message. Elect libertarian politicians and you'll get a better world. What people hear is elect libertarian politicians and you'll get the world that I want. And then they'll follow that up with libertarians just want to take over the world and leave everybody alone. I don't need to keep ranting about libertarians. Matt has a Lolbert voodoo doll he sticks pins in. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Lolberts are constantly finding bear traps, getting stuck in them, and making bear mating calls for the bear to come destroy them. That's fantastic.
And the bears are happy to oblige. I'll say that.
The bear is happy to oblige.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that was basically about all we had. Well, let's see. There's some more comments here. So let me just make sure that I don't need to address anything else in here.
If Matt doesn't read your comment sucked, and you should unsubscribe because he hates you.
Yes, and unlike the video if you liked it,
which you probably, statistically speaking, you probably didn't.
The issues with liberals is that they believe that they can overcome anarchy through human reason and cooperation. Paul wrote Romans 3 from a jail cell for preaching the gospel, ironically, which that should lend even more power to what he's saying. He's saying, I'm in jail and just, what's very interesting too, is that the biblical perspective on existing governmental structures is very, very similar to Curtis Yarvin's perspective on existing governmental structures.
An atheist.
Yes, which is just go along. Don't attack it. Don't get in its face. Don't piss it off. Just go along. Do whatever you need to do. Just go along. Just adapt to it. And in the meantime, be building something that could potentially solve problems down the road in the future. It's very interesting. It's fascinating that a guy like a prophet like Curtis Yarvin would have a take like that. Interesting. Yeah. Our Antichrist. The Optimists, they were the opposing party to Caesar. Yeah, the modern equivalent called themselves progressives. Yeah. The progressives are like the Optimates of Rome. If liberty is so precious, why do they give it away for literally nothing? That's a really good observation. If liberty is so precious, why do people give it away for nothing? Obviously, they don't value it. They don't see it as precious. So then a political movement predicated on treating it as precious, by definition, isn't going to appeal to people. And Popular Liberty, as usual, has a good response. He says, because responsibility is tyrannical, the responsibility that comes with liberty, that is. Because every right is actually a responsibility. This is one thing that when I talk about when I do the episode on anarchism as self-worship, one thing that I want to talk about is human rights and our perception of them and how flawed it is. Our being modern Americans, our perception on human rights are rooted in a concept of the self, or of they're rooted in a concept of the individual that is flawed, I believe, and there's an emphasis on rights and a loss of emphasis on the responsibility. And if you focus on the responsibility, then the rights naturally follow. So if you're fighting for your rights without fighting for the right to take on responsibility, then you aren't actually fighting for rights. You're just throwing a temper tantrum. Okay, let's see. Train is gone. Okay. Okay, looking at these last couple comments. The value of strength. More train. The value of strength and masculinity is still on the pedestal, but the natural order of man is deposed. All else, i.e., femininity in women, is demonized, as is masculinity in men, but the inverse is celebrated. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. From Josiah. He's talking about the woke movement and how it's inverted Christianity. I think it has inverted Christianity, but when I say Christianity, there's in every social, religious, political movement, you have the actual core truth associated with it, and then you have as you get further and further from that, a bunch of different people who all see themselves as possessing the core truth. And they're like, everyone else, they've lost the core truth. So every ideology ends up being this factional dispute between a whole bunch of people who believe that they're the ones who have the core truth and not everybody else. So they're like, well, we're the true Christians. We're the true libertarian. We're the true Democrats. We're the true whatever. And so when I say Christianity, I'm talking about the whole thing, because you can take Christianity has a bazillion different denominations and different strains and everything, but you can take it all and you can boil it down to a network of undergirding principles that distinguish this whole network of Christianity from every other network of belief, from Judaism and from Islam and from Buddhism and from Hindu, and you could still go even lower than that, and you can figure out the things that like a set that would include all of those. But I'm talking about the set of Christianity that includes every different every different sect of Christianity, the people that see themselves as descended ideologically from Christ. So if you could draw a direct ideological line from someone today back to Christ, I'm calling that person a Christian. Now, you can have your debate over who's the real Christians, who are the true Christians, and really what we need is we need a different word just to kind of distinguish those two concepts. But I'm saying that the concept that I'm referring to is that general set of people that would all so it would include everyone who sees themselves as traced back to Christianity. So in that context, then the woke crowd that traces itself through, the Frankfurt School and all, like, you could tie a direct ideological line back through the Enlightenment, through the Reformation, and all the way back to Christ. So the woke movement would not exist without Christ. Like, Christ to the woke movement is a direct line, and they exist just because Christ existed. Which, when you say it's an inversion of Christianity, that's kind of implicit in that. Because if you're inverting Christianity, you're still governed by the principles of Christianity. You're just inverting them, and I think that we're really getting to the kind of the root of reality with this, because I think there's no question that Christianity is the single worldview, even if you don't consider yourself a Christian, if you're just kind of trying to look at this scientifically or something, there's no question that Christianity is the most adaptive belief system of all time. It has taken over the minds of more people, and it has directed more of world history than any other belief system ever. And so I think that gets at with the term that I've used before as a meta truth, that it's not just true in like a factual historical level, but it's true on a metaphysical level. And it's describing the story of the gospel, the Christian narrative of the Bible is describing, it's symbolic for a like fundamental truth of reality. And so once you've reached that base level fundamental truth, if you're now going to try to invert its principles, that's associated with a very specific spirit. A spirit that directly subverts or inverts the principles of like base reality. And that's where you're really getting at the heart of what wokeism is, what progressivism is. Anyways, we lost Steven. He said that he's having issues with trains and everything. So we're just going to wrap it up here. It's been about an hour and a half. This has been a fun show. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We will be back here again on Monday at, we say 12:30, 12:45, 1 o'clock, some point in there. You'll find it out. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled. Follow Steven on Twitter, or don't follow Steven on Twitter at Messina Inc. And then one last time, if you could like this video, we're up to 16 likes with 21 watching. So we need 5 more of you guys to like it. And then everyone who comes after the fact and watches it, if you could like the video and then share it and subscribe to our channel, subscribe to us on iTunes if this is an audio show that you're listening to. And yeah, thank you guys for listening. This has been an episode of King Pilled, and we will see you.